You don't have to speak a single word to dominate a room, because the lewdest thing about you is your energy. Before you even open your mouth, people have already made a decision about you. And here's what they're judging: your posture, your presence, your stillness. When you walk in like you don't need validation, you become the standard. People fear what they can't figure out. They respect what they can't shake. Most people try to win others over by talking too much. Wrong move. Silence is a weapon. Stillness is a power move. If your energy screams, "I know who I am," you don't have to prove it. They'll feel it. Stop explaining yourself. Stop over-smiling to make others comfortable. Stop shrinking your presence to fit in. You're not here to be liked. You're here to be remembered. You want to command fear and respect? Then walk like your name is already in rooms you haven't stepped into. Look people in the eye, not to intimidate, but to remind them you're not afraid to be seen. Stand tall even when you feel small inside. That's how you trick your mind into becoming unbreakable. Your energy introduces you before your mouth ever moves. And if that energy isn't solid, confident, and aligned with self-respect, people will decide how to treat you before you even speak. You see, most people walk into a room hoping to be accepted, hoping to be liked, hoping not to ruffle feathers. And right there, they lose the game. Because the moment you need approval to stand tall, you've already shrunk yourself. People don't respond to words as much as they respond to signals. Nonverbal, raw, primal signals. How you walk, how you sit, how you look someone dead in the eyes without flinching. That is the language of dominance. That is the posture of someone who doesn't need to impress because they've already accepted themselves. Confidence is not just felt. It's transmitted like a frequency, and it's contagious. And when you step into a space carrying a frequency of, "I know who I am," people either rise to meet it or step out of your way. That's how power moves, not with noise, but with unwavering, grounded energy that doesn't stutter, doesn't shake, doesn't shrink. We live in a world obsessed with talking. Everyone is explaining, defending, performing. But the real power is in how little you need to say why. Because when you walk into a space like you belong there, like you own your worth, people feel it in their bones. Your stillness becomes unsettling. Your calm becomes intimidating. Because most people are chaotic inside. And when they meet someone centered and certain, it disrupts their entire nervous system. People can't control what they can't read. And when your energy is calm, composed, and intentional, you become unreadable. That's when fear and respect start to mix. Not because you're trying to scare anyone, but because you've become unpredictable. You're not reactive. You're not desperate. You're not dancing for their comfort. You are grounded. And grounded people are dangerous in the best way possible. You've got to understand that fear and respect don't come from aggression. They come from composure. They come from someone who could explode, but chooses not to. Someone who could dominate with noise, but doesn't need to. Someone who could seek validation, but already validated themselves in silence. That kind of presence bends reality. People begin to move differently around you. They begin to adjust their words, their behavior, their tone. And it's not because you demand it with your voice. It's your presence didn't give them another option. You taught them how to treat you without a single sentence. There is nothing louder than someone who has nothing to prove. When you're still, when you're silent, and when you carry yourself with unapologetic confidence, people listen differently. They observe you longer. They measure their words more carefully because you've shown them you are not seeking their approval. You are measuring their energy instead. That's a shift most people are not ready for. They're used to people bending, pleasing, accommodating. But when you enter the room like you already belong, without begging for a seat, the room starts to notice. Because in a world full of noise, silence backed by self-worth becomes a thunderclap. Energy doesn't lie. You can say the right things, wear the right clothes, smile at the right time, but if your energy screams insecurity, that's what people will react to. That's why the work has nothing to do with performance and everything to do with alignment. Alignment with who you are. alignment with what you stand for, alignment with what you refuse to tolerate. The most dangerous energy in the room is the person who cannot be moved by opinions, not because they're arrogant, but because they've already made peace with who they are. They've faced their demons. They've earned their calm. And now they walk through fire without blinking. That is a level of presence that shakes people without a single word. Don't misunderstand this. Presence is not about being perfect. It's about being whole. It's about walking in like you know what you're about, what you bring, what you're worth. It's about not needing to convince anyone of anything. Because when you know who you are, their opinions become background noise. And when their opinions no longer control you, you become untouchable. That's the energy that commands fear. That's the energy that demands respect, without yelling, without forcing, without proving. If people don't feel your presence, it's not because you aren't worth. It's because you've hidden it under years of over-explaining, over-apologizing, and over-performing. Strip that off. Stand in your rawness. Let your presence be sharp, still, and certain. Because there's nothing more magnetic than someone who doesn't chase approval, but instead commands attention through their grounded truth. And in that silence, in that certainty, in that energy that walks 10 steps ahead of your words, that's where power lives. That's where the game changes. That's where people start treating you like someone they shouldn't mess with. And you never even had to speak. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not submission. Silence, when it comes from confidence, becomes the most terrifying and commanding force in the room. Because in a world where everyone is screaming to be seen, the person who doesn't need to raise their voice becomes the most unforgettable. That kind of silence is not passive. It's strategic. It's a deliberate decision to speak through presence, not performance. And that silence, that intentional restraint, sends a message louder than any speech ever could. It says, I don't need to prove myself to you. I don't need to defend my value. I already know who I am, and that alone is enough. People underestimate the power of being unbothered. They think silence means surrender. But when your silence comes from inner certainty, it becomes a mirror that exposes everyone else's insecurity, and that makes people uncomfortable. That makes people nervous. That makes people respect you without fully understanding why. When someone disrespects you and you meet it with silence, not because you're scared, but because you're too powerful to entertain nonsense, that is a shock to the system. People expect chaos. They expect a reaction. They expect you to lower your frequency and match theirs. But when you don't flinch, when you don't respond, when you stay still while the world tries to provoke you, you instantly shift the dynamic. You move from reactive to untouchable. Because silence in the face of chaos isn't weakness. It's dominance. It's you saying, I don't need to dance with dysfunction. I don't need to shout to be heard. My silence already told you everything. That type of energy dismantles manipulation. It breaks the narcissist's grip. It starves the drama of attention. Because nothing starves toxicity faster than your complete disinterest in feeding it. You have to understand that the reason silence is so powerful is because it forces people to sit with themselves. When you don't fill the space with words, others are left to fill it with their own guilt, their own confusion, their own fear. And people hate sitting in silence with themselves because it exposes their chaos. So when you hold your ground in silence, not to punish, but to protect your peace, you force people to realize they can't shake you. That's when the fear sets in. That's when the respect rises. Because they know this person isn't just quiet. They are calculated, they are whole. They are not dependent on my reaction to validate their worth. They have mastered themselves. And that is the kind of power that cannot be manipulated, cannot be baited, cannot be broken. Silence from insecurity is different from silence from strength. Insecurity makes you freeze in fear. Strength makes you choose stillness with precision, and people feel the difference. When your silence comes from fear, people pounce. But when your silence comes from power, people pause. They think twice. They question their tone. They adjust their behavior. Because your stillness is unsettling. It interrupts their patterns. They can't figure you out. And what people can't figure out, they can't control. That's when your silence becomes a weapon. Not a weapon of destruction, but a weapon of self-protection. A shield that says, you don't get to drain my energy. You don't get to dictate my reactions. You don't get access to my emotions just because you want attention. The loudest people in the room are usually the most insecure. They cover their fear with volume. But the person who can sit in total silence and still feel powerful, that person is untouchable. Because they are not looking for a stage. They are the stage. They don't need to shout to make an impact. Their very presence shifts the room. Their energy commands attention before a single word is spoken. That's what silence does when it's backed by self-respect. It becomes the thunder no one sees coming. It becomes the storm that doesn't rage. It just changes the entire atmosphere. People who have mastered silence have mastered power. Because they don't fight small battles. They don't chase validation. They don't argue with fools. They understand that the strongest message they can send is no message at all. You want to shake someone. Say nothing. You want to make someone rethink everything they just did to you. Stay calm. You want to break a pattern that's been sucking your energy dry. Go quiet. The moment you stop explaining yourself is the moment people start realizing they don't have as much control over you as they thought. That's the moment they realize your silence isn't weakness. It's a withdrawal of access. And when you withdraw access, when you stop giving your attention, your energy, your words, that's when people feel the void. That's when they understand the cost of losing your peace. Because silence backed by confidence feels like exile, and people fear exile from someone whose presence they never respected until it disappeared. Silence makes people nervous because it creates space, and in that space, truth echoes. People hear what they said. People feel what they did. People realize how far they went. And they have no distraction, no noise, no defense mechanism to hide behind. Your silence holds up a mirror they can't look away from. That's why silence is feared by the manipulator. That's why silence is respected by the wise. That's why silence is misunderstood by the loud. Because when silence comes from someone who knows their worth, it's not empty. It's full of meaning, full of power, full of boundaries. It's the invisible force that says, you don't deserve a reaction from me. You don't get access to my peace. I will not spend my voice explaining what your spirit already knows. Silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means everything is happening internally. Growth, alignment, self-control, clarity, power. The strongest transformations are quiet. The most dangerous shifts happen in silence. You don't need to announce your rise. You just need to let your energy evolve until people can't recognize the version of you that once tolerated disrespect. That's how silence works. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't beg for understanding. It simply transforms you into someone unshakable, untouchable, and unforgettable. And the ones who once overlooked you will be the first to feel the difference. Not through your voice, but through your absence, through your calm, through the power you gained when you stopped performing and started preserving. That's what silence from confidence becomes. It's not the absence of words. It's the presence of strength. It's the boldness to let your energy do the talking. It's the wisdom to know that you don't owe anyone a reaction. You owe yourself your peace. And when your silence is rooted in that kind of unshakable self-respect, you don't just command the room. You command your life.